Well, hello and welcome, everyone. It's so good to be with you. I'm Bishop Mark Seitz, the Bishop of the Diocese of El Paso in Texas. I'm so happy that I have the opportunity to be with you and with Dr. Menjívar.
And I am Cecilia Menjívar, and I am a professor of sociology and director of the Center for the Study of International Migration at UCLA in Los Angeles.
So we have the Southwest and the West represented today between us, and it's very good to be with you and to have an opportunity for conversation between faith and academia about the issue that is so much on the front of the minds of many people in the United States right now. And just the fundamentally how we receive immigrants, how we should see them and um, and treat them.
Right, right, right. Yes, I am very glad that we have this opportunity to share our respective views and where we come from, and all the commonalities we also have regarding um, what's happening in immigration today
Mhm.
and misconceptions, myths, um, and things that we would like to see clarified or corrected. So I'm
Mm.
glad that we are having this conversation.
I suppose it would be helpful to our viewers if we just tell them a little bit about how we come to this particular work, at least as best we understand it. And maybe we can launch into some various discussions from there.
Yes, in my case, I was born and raised in El Salvador, and I was doing my doctoral dissertation during the time when there was a massive increase in migration from El Salvador and then from Guatemala, connected to the civil conflicts, to the civil wars there. And so I became interested um, in looking at the drivers of that migration and also how they were received in the United States. These were people who were fleeing a very violent conflict, and yet the United States government did not extend refugee protection to them. So that was a puzzle that I wanted to address in my dissertation.
Were you doing
And
that study from the United States or from El Salvador?
I was doing that study in San Francisco from the United States point of view because I became more interested in the mismatch between what they were, the conditions people were living from that would have um, would have prompted any government to provide protection, refugee protection or asylum protection, and how they were received in the United States. And the US government, since the 1980s, during that time, was receiving them as basically economic migrants and classifying them as undocumented. So far from extending them protection, it was transforming them into undocumented immigrants, meaning they could be deported. And so that all of that became central to my dissertation research, and that's how I came to study this topic.
Yes, you were coming at it in a certain way from the inside, and yet from academia, you were able to step back a little bit and really examine more broadly what was taking place.
Right. In, I, I, w- I was born and raised in the United States, and I came here, but I didn't come here to seek asylum. I came here mostly to go to school here and to go to college, and but I have always been close to El Salvador and to what happens there and what happens to immigrants here. And I was there at a time when this migration was new. This increase, this massive migration was new. Most most scholars of migration were focusing either on Mexican migration or on Cuban refugees or people who were classified as refugees. And then there was this m- flow of people from Central America that was not very well understood. And so I was able to fill in to provide some clarity on the mismatch that I capture in my work.
Maybe as you're speaking about your own situation, you could enlighten us a little bit about what was going on in those years in El Salvador and why so many people were leaving their country.
Right. The country um, had historically had deeply unequal distribution of wealth, and the overwhelming majority of the people lived in poverty. And so socioeconomic inequalities have been part of the history of the country. And in the 70s, late 70s, um, there were a lot of protests that exploded into an outright civil war. And people were being taken out of their homes at night, disappear. 200,000 people were killed during the Civil War, according to one of the UN reports, um, hum- the Truth Commission reports. And so that created the drivers for an increase. Salvadorians had always migrated to the United States for different reasons. For instance, in my research in San Francisco, I was able to interview Salvadorians who had been who were descendants of early Salvadorian migrants. There were fourth generation Salvadorians in San Francisco, but very few. A lot of them came for business reasons, but in the 80s, that was very different. The quantity and composition of the migration was completely different. That included middle class, lower middle class, working class people who were being caught in crossfire between the government and the so-called rebels, but there were actually a movement to try to change those historical inequalities. And so they so that was the precursor for the migration, the very violent civil war that was actually where the United States actually had played a role in that the government fighting the opposition was received quite a bit of military help from the United States, and so that was also in the research that I did. One of the reasons why the United States could not classify people fleeing a conflict they were supporting militarily as refugees because it would have contradicted foreign policy. So that was also another reason why um, the United States refused to recognize the plight of the migrants who were
Yeah.
fleeing
It,
um,
it,
from El Salvador and Guatemala too.
it's also interesting to understand that, a lot of times we blame people for coming to our country, right? But we're actually one of the drivers, right?
Right.
And that's been
For
the case
conditions the
much.
United States was contributing to create it. The United States, very, I think I have to be very clear, it was not pushing the Salvadorian government to do that, but it was aiding, collaborating in creating those conditions that people needed to flee from.
Mhm.
And that's how, so that was that was my the impetus and the drive and the my interest in trying to understand what was happening with this huge increase in migration at that time.
Yeah.
I was doing this research in the late 80s, early 90s.
Something that we in the United States don't understand well. When you speak about the divide between the economic classes in your country, um, I don't think we really grasp, unless perhaps we've been there, how dramatic that divide was. Uh, we're
Yes.
used to a country that has a bit of a middle class, right? Uh,
Right.
what was it like there?
Right. No, the inequalities in the whole region, but specifically in El Salvador, were incomprehensible to many. The overwhelming majority of people lived on very little a day. For a long time, agriculture was a main source of employment, but agriculture was in the hands of very few landowners who cultivated, for instance, coffee for export and relied on semi-feudal labor relations to generate huge profits. So that's a significant portion of the Salvadorian population. But then there was also the sources of employment in cities followed more or less the same pattern of labor exploitation, labor relations, extremely unequal. And so when I was trying to explain the drivers for this migration, yes, the Civil War created immediate conditions, immediate bombings, crossfires, disappearances, all of that. But that also intersected and coalesced with these incredible historical inequalities where people also needed to find a way to survive. So when they arrived in the United States, they became more easily classified as economic migrants because they were looking for survival. But the immediate conditions were um, the, the violence of the Civil War.
Yeah. Just this past Tuesday, the 24th, we in the church celebrated the feast of one of my heroes uh, that I've come to
Yes,
know of, not as
Saint
a child,
Oscar. Yes,
but yes, Saint Oscar Romero. Pope
yes,
Francis made him a saint, canonized him.
yes.
Uh, he died, I believe, in 1981. Uh, he,
He
some
died in March 1980,
1980. Uh,
saying Mass.
saying Mass. I've
He
had the
was
opportunity to
shot.
celebrate Mass in that same chapel,
Oh, wow.
the hospital, and
Oh, wow.
yeah,
Yes,
and a what did they call it? A death squad showed up
yes,
as he was celebrating Mass
yes.
and shot him right there.
As he elevated the chalice,
Uh,
they shot him in the heart.
yes,
It was quite, yes, um, yes. It was.
yeah.
I
He was
think
good.
we all have not memories because I wasn't even there, but we all know the story because it's such an impactful moment for the history of the country.
Absolutely. Uh, and what a witness. He is the man who, according to what I've learned, was, he grew up in the Church of El Salvador, which had pulled back from being involved in the social realities
Mm.
the of that time and focused on important things like prayer and the sacraments, which obviously are very
Right.
important
Yes.
for the church, but wasn't involved in what was going on in your country until a dear friend of his was himself assassinated along with two companions who were with him.
Yes.
And that kind of woke him up, and he knew that he had to speak to those issues.
And
Uh,
he did forcefully.
he had a radio program that was listened to. Was it on Saturdays?
Yes,
I believe
his
every
homilies,
yes,
her homilies were transmitted. Yes,
exactly. It was mass that was transmitted, but his homilies became quite long teaching sessions in which
yes,
he would say things that no one else would dare
ex-
say.
exactly, exactly, and that's why he was assassinated. And that really also changed a lot in the Civil War was just beginning at that time, but it also made priests, Catholic priests, targets of the government.
Mhm.
So priests were killed, assassinated.
Yeah.
4 nuns were killed. I don't remember how many priests were killed during the Civil War, but there was a slogan by the death squads that they it was a combination of patriotism and what the death squads did. Um, be a patriot, kill a priest, because they were trying to paint priests as communists, as communist agitators, just because they were speaking about the social reality of profound inequalities that drove people both to migrate but also to revolt.
Yes.
Um, but that's how they that's the context where and then in 10 years later in 1990 the 4 Jesuit priests were killed in their home for the same reason.
Yes.
And that was at the end of the towards the end of the Civil War. The 4 priests and their two workers were in
And
the
Maryknoll
house.
sisters also.
Yes,
But,
4 Maryknoll sisters. Yes,
right, from the standpoint of the church, this is not a new story. Uh,
right,
uh,
right,
Priests, sisters, Catholics have given their life all through our history, and they've been seen as, people involved in political things and people who were against whatever regime because they simply read the gospel and saw that it applied to the lives of the people of their time. And
right, right,
I
right.
I think that's, if I were to explain where I come from as a person who has dedicated himself as a, disciple of Jesus, as a priest,
Mhm.
that's that basically explains it in a certain way.
Right,
Um,
right.
uh, uh,
I
I
was going to say, I was going to ask you, because the connections cannot be missed. The work of the Catholic Church, um, of the religious from the church here on behalf of immigrants. I think it's the are are moved by similar teachings.
Yes.
And how so how did you come to this work? And I'm sure you see the connections that I'm seeing, that I have
Yes.
seen.
Well, I can't say that, as a young man, I said, "I want to be involved in immigration issues in the United States." It was pretty far from my thought, as a matter of fact. I grew up not in the South or certainly not in Latin America. I grew up in Wisconsin. Uh,
That's
I didn't even know a Latino or Latina. Um, I I, uh, was my roots are German on my father's side, Irish on my mother's side. But I think the ground was prepared in a certain way because although uh, my uh, my roots, my connection to the home countries wasn't too close. It was my great grandfather who came from Germany, and I did know him. Uh, and then, but on the Irish side, it had been generations. I'm not even sure how long. However, growing up, I learned to appreciate the story, and one of the ways I was taught was by their songs. And it's interesting. I think one will find in pretty much every immigrant groups that they recall and express their love for their homeland in songs. The Irish did a really good job, as I look at it, at also
Yes.
talking about their longing for the place that they had left. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes referring to some of the reasons there, things like the potato famine and the oppression that they experienced from the British. Um,
Right, right,
so,
right.
so I grew up being aware of that, and also I have to say there's a strong piece of me, and perhaps it goes to my uh, childhood experience to some degree. I really don't like bullies. I don't I really get incensed when I see the vulnerable being taken advantage of,
Yeah.
n not being singled out simply because they're different, you know? Um, those kinds of attitudes, really move me. And as I
Yes.
mentioned earlier, uh, thank God, my faith has taught me, basic things. The more I try to imbue myself in the gospel of Jesus, the more I see uh, that being his disciple means trying to be like him, trying to show
Mhm.
concern for for the poor, for those who were left out, the lepers, for instance, that that he had a special love for, and kind of broke rules in order to cure and help them.
Right,
Um,
right.
so many things, that the scriptures tell us, not only the Gospels, uh, Old Testament, the Hebrew scriptures themselves have so much to say. And it's interesting, they say a lot more about loving the stranger and loving the immigrant than they say about loving your brothers and sisters. Kind of interesting, isn't it?
Interesting,
A
very
lot
interesting.
more there.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I grew up in that. I found my way to Dallas as an 18-year-old kid and decided to enter the seminary there at the University of Dallas. And uh, that was where I tasted my first taco. And it was in Dallas, and where I also had the opportunity to begin to get to know the Latino, Hispanic culture. There was a migration that was coming from primarily Mexico in those days in the early 70s
It,
that was
yes.
changing the face of Dallas, frankly. Uh,
Mhm.
but in my exposure to people from there, I came to see things that I thought I just fell in love with, and I thought my culture, as beautiful as it was, it had lost some of those elements. For instance, the
Mhm.
tremendous love of family, the closeness of family units, the way they spent time together and stayed connected,
Mhm.
um, the love of community, more broadly, um, their faith, which was so deeply ingrained. Up in Wisconsin, where I grew up, many wonderful people, don't get me wrong, but the streams of secularism had begun to reach in, and people saw their faith as kind of boxed off, apart from their life. And
Mhm.
that just never made sense to me. But I
Yeah.
found in the Latino culture this beautiful integration, of the faith, even in the expressions, you know, uh,
Mhm.
Dios provee, um, uh,
Mhm.
si Dios quiere, um, uh, you know,
Yes.
simple things, adios, uh,
Adios. I know.
adios, no, it's just so
To
deeply,
God.
yeah,
That's how
uh,
you say bye.
right, and I fell in love with that, and,
Yeah.
I wanted to help them. I wanted to serve them. They were also suffering a lot, as immigrants do when they come to a new place. But,
Yes.
it's kind of funny, as I look back, uh, I thought I would help them. I was gonna help them. Well, uh, I realized, fortunately, before too very long, that they were gonna help me a lot more than I helped them, and I would be enriched by my encounter with
Right,
them. Uh,
right,
I
right, right.
also got involved in having a sister church, sister parish, first in Mexico and then
Mm,
in Honduras, and
Okay,
and,
yes.
it was just I wanted
yeah,
to learn why people were coming in the first place,
yeah.
kinda like our discussion at the beginning here. I didn't really understand, why would these people leave home? Why would they risk their lives? I somehow knew it wasn't simply to get a better car, you know? Uh, it wasn't
Right.
it wasn't that, it was I found out it was to survive.
Yes. Basic, very basic. Yes. You know, one thing that I'm always still puzzles me, and I read a lot about these things, but I still think it's interesting. You mentioned that scripture and gospels are very much infused with um, creating a love for immigrants, a love for a stranger. Yet we have so many people who call themselves Christians, some Catholics even, who create differences. Not everybody is the same. They find justifications in not following that basic principle. And it's the same scripture, it's the same gospel, but why the big differences in how people react and treat immigrants?
Yeah, uh, it's hard for you to understand, and it's frustrating to me, because the Catholic Church is structured in such a way that we have a teaching authority that we believe is guided by the Holy Spirit, and it teaches. But somehow, so many of our Catholics um, are more likely to decide what they believe instead of what the church is saying. They can say, "Well, I believe that Jesus is the Son of God, but I don't necessarily believe I'm supposed to treat a person that is from another country like a
Right.
child of God," you know?
Yes.
And
Yes.
I don't think that it's tenable.
Mhm.
And but and of course there are ways that people work around it, and I'm sure with goodwill. I have no question
Yes,
about
yes.
that. But I wish that they would listen more carefully to what the church has
Yes.
consistently said
Right.
through certainly through the centuries, but even more clearly in in um, in recent times, which have been marked in the world by a level of immigration that is has never been seen in history, right? So brings this teaching to a higher visibility, and it means we have to kind of deal with it more personally.
Right, right, right. And the Catholic Church does that at all levels of the hierarchy. The Scalabrini priests, for instance, they are dedicated to providing for the
Yeah,
immigrants.
that's their charism. That's what they
Exactly.
are ordained to do, and and their sisters as well.
I yes, and so seeing all of this and seeing the messages all the way from the Pope all the way to priests to lay workers, and then I also see these other reactions that create separations and create differences, not treating everyone the same. So it to me is always a puzzle that it's the same teaching, same everything, but people find ways to maybe, as you said, work around it,
Right.
in, influenced by other forces.
Well, this is not a new phenomenon in the life of the church or of followers of God, right?
Right, right.
Read the Old Testament. See how many times poor Moses struggled to keep his people online. Um,
Right,
look
right, right, right.
look at the events we're getting ready to celebrate as we speak
Yes.
today. We're only a week from the Friday we call Good in the church. Good because it's the day Jesus gave his life for us. Um, and um, and we see how even his disciples, like on the night before he died, they were arguing about who was the greatest. Here he's trying to show how he is going to give himself in utter humility uh,
Right.
to uh, to the last drop of his blood for for the poor, for sinners, you know, and
Right.
and they're fighting about that, and then eventually running away. Uh, so this
Yes.
isn't new, but by the
Right.
same token, we in the church have to recognize that we have a responsibility to teach
Yeah.
and to
Yes.
be true to the gospel.
Right,
Uh,
right. And I
so
think
we're trying to do that.
also to guide and to inform, because
So
often people make up their own opinions based on social media, on what they hear in the news. And I think the church then has um, a place to rectify, to clarify, to teach and to guide.
right.
And that is, people seek that in the church.
Thank you for pointing that out. And I think you bring me to a point that in the complexity of this country's reaction to immigrants, we need to acknowledge that many, many people who were born in this country, particularly, are fearful. There's fear all around, right? Fear in the hearts of immigrants, certainly by the actions that are going on now. Terrible fear, terror, really. Um,
Yes.
but but a lot of the responses of people are caused by fear that is in our hearts. Those of us who are native born American citizens, uh, and that terror causes people to react to some degree irrationally sometimes, or just based on a couple of pieces of information that we're given. And and what people have been told is that immigrants are a risk to you. They're a danger to you. Immigrants are criminals. They're rapists. You know,
Right.
uh, they
Right.
are thieves um, and you name it's on the
Oh yeah.
list, right? Um,
Yeah.
and those accusations don't say, well, there are some criminals among them. You know, there are some rapists
Mhm.
that have been allowed to come. It's just a generalization that covers in the minds of people a whole community, sometimes a whole um, race or people, of color. Uh,
Yes.
and and that's where we run into the big problems. And in the
Yes.
church, we're not Pollyannish. We don't say, well, there are no people who have done wrong in the community of immigrants. In fact, we in the church say there should be a process by which people formally enter this country,
Yeah.
where they make clear their reasons, whether it's fleeing for asylum or whether it's to do a job that's not being done in this country. They should be able to. they should be able to make their case, and they should be vetted to make sure that they are not a risk uh,
Right.
here. But
Right.
the problem we have is that so many people came here and have actually followed the rules the best that they possibly could, and still today find themselves um, at risk of being summarily detained and deported.
Right. 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 And I think also that fear created, it's very much linked to not just misinformation, but misinformation. For instance, one very frustrating thing for us in academia when we hear the news and when we see how immigrants are being constructed and portrayed as criminals, for instance, is that we know the data. We know that on the whole, given their demographic profile, immigrants commit far less crime across the board than the same profile in the general population. That's almost like a given. So many studies have found that. Almost every study. That's and the other studies have found that when immigrants concentrate in particular communities, crime actually goes down.
Right.
So not only
Right.
do they not fit the profile, the demographic profile of people who overwhelmingly commit crimes, but also contribute to lowering the crime.
Yeah.
So these are like givens in research. We have hundreds of studies, we have data, we have surveys, we have police report, we have everything. But this evidence is contorted and presented in incorrectly to the public. And so the public gets to hear, especially when people are not do not know immigrants or immigrants are
Right.
sort of far from them, they believe those this misinformation, these incorrect portrayals of immigrants that are so frustrating for us because we know what well we what what we have. The other thing that people don't realize is that a set of immigration laws that were passed in the mid 90s, the immigration, the Illegal Immigration Responsibility Control Act, that set of laws expanded is incrementally the categories of misdemeanors for which people could be deported.
No.
So on the one hand, we have the media portrayals and some elected politicians misusing information and data. But at the same time, we have these laws that created crimes for immigrants, but not for the general population. So there are 20 different categories of crime that are felonious crimes for immigrants, but not for the regular population. So that means that for immigrants, those misdemeanors or offenses are deportable because any felony is a deportable offense. So it is deportable for immigrants, but it's not a felony for the regular population. So the laws themselves have contributed to expand the the number of immigrants who are criminalized through law, who end up in detention, who end up entangled in the system. So then that is probably one of the hardest things to convey and to understand. Then the news and some elected officials pick up on that. And so they said, "Oh, there are so many immigrants who are in the justice system." But it's because the laws have created that and have expanded the population that ends up in this situation. So from the point of view of academia, we have hundreds of studies that show this criminalization, hundreds of studies that show that immigrants, their demographic profile does not, um, th- given the demographic profile, they don't commit as much crime as the same profile in the general population. And then, third, the when they concentrate in same communities, crime actually goes down. So imagine the frustration that when we and we don't have the same platforms, we don't have the same access to be able to clarify, to share all this knowledge that we have accumulated for decades.
Yeah.
And that is
That,
very frustrating.
that's really interesting to me because it's an area where uh, you in academia, as well as ourselves, myself and others that are religious leaders, we share a frustration there. You know, part
Yes.
of my work as I uh, took on the responsibility of chair of the Bishop's Migration Committee for the last 3 years, was that how do I get this message down to the grassroots, you know? Before
Yes.
we move on from this topic, would you clarify what would be some of the misdemeanors that would be considered sufficient now to deport a person?
Shoplifting,
Shoplifting.
DUI, stalking. There's several categories of crimes that now, before 1996, they were not, they were misdemeanors, and so people
Yes.
would go to prison, would or to to pay to society for the crime they committed. But after 1996, those infractions became were elevated to a felony. The other point of that same law is that all of that became retroactive, meaning that if a person committed one of these offenses earlier, years earlier, when those offenses were classified only as misdemeanors, they were retroactively reclassified
Wow.
as felonious offenses. So, this is also why we have a lot of lawful permanent residents, people with green cards, who became entangled in the system and were also deportable.
You know, in our justice system, as I understand it, we've always tried to have a punishment that is proportional to the crime, right? Uh, and I think all of us would agree with that. I think we'd all
True.
agree if we're caught driving 5 miles over the speed limit without endangering, you know, reckless. Not we're not talking reckless driving or something. That you know we expect to perhaps get a ticket, uh,
Right.
but we don't expect to be thrown into jail. You know,
Right.
um,
Right.
but
Right.
you know the what we're doing with people who have created these newly categorized offenses is we're separating families. We're
Oh,
destroying
absolutely.
their ability to support themselves.
Mhm.
We're putting people back into situations that were not just difficult; they were life threatening. So there's a certain level of a punishment here that is not proportional. And I think we can also point out that it's not only people who have some kind of offense listed that are being deported now. It's
Oh,
it's people
now
who
it's
are in the legal process are being pulled off the streets, literally, or from their houses, and
great.
and being deported. Even U.S. citizens have been deported in the rush to get them out of the country.
Right. In the rush to detain, because apparently detentions is what the goal. A lot of people are detained and may not necessarily end up in deportation, but detention apparently is the goal. And and that is it. Also, since January 2025, something has changed. A lot of things have changed, but before there were these sensitive locations where
Yes.
the people were not permitted, where ICE and immigration enforcement agencies were not permitted to detain or go in. But now that's no longer the case.
Yeah.
Now they can go into hospitals, courthouses, churches, and
Schools.
churches. This that was one of the most shocking because that is also connected to sanctuary, and it's a historical line that comes from respecting that space, and
Right.
that's no longer the case.
Yeah, and when you think about the fact that people who go there are cooperating with the law. Sometimes, the argument that they've said is, "Well, these people will never self-report, they'll never, uh, you know, uh,
Mhm.
cooperate with the system, so we have to detain them." But what the heck? These are people who are specifically, that's why they're
Right.
there. And I've been in those courts, and
Oh,
it's just
yes.
utterly heartbreaking to
Oh, you've
to
seen that.
to see, they come, and I sat in on a case that a man and his 15-year-old son, the judge said, you're gonna need a lawyer to pursue your case, and so I'm going to continue this case such and such a date. They walk out. ICE agents are waiting for them. These things are happening every day in our country. So many of us don't even know what's going on, you know.
Most people don't know.
Yeah. And it's
Most
sad to say we don't know our immigrant brothers and sisters. We might see them cutting the lawn. Uh,
Right.
we might be eating the food, of course, that they're cooking for us. We might be eating the vegetables that they've picked. We don't know
Mhm.
them. Uh, I really
Right.
often think, there would be an easy um, balance that could come back to this discussion if only people in our country knew whose lives they were impacting.
Yes. And most people don't know. Most people are misinformed. Most people get quick news, quick snippets, just a few words, completely disconnected from the lives that are being impacted. Most people don't. Or if they do know, what if they have is the when people are regularly exposed to the same messages through social media, through
Right.
regular media, it is difficult for them um to change that when once they see a family separated or
Knows.
or an image of small children crying because their parents are being taken away. What happens is that they sort of um, adjust their perceptions, and they think that those people deserve that, and so they, because they did something wrong, they came here illegally, they did something against the law, so they justify it in their minds because it is so incongruent to see, to hear the 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 messages that criminalize, and then to see this heart-wrenching image of children being separated from their families. So the easiest thing for the brain, I guess, is to think that's to justify this act, to understand
We
it
just
as
expect our law enforcement is going to be,
right.
doing something that is
Yes.
just and
Right,
necessary.
exactly. Always the expectation that law enforcement is always there to protect and to secure and
Mhm.
to serve.
And generally, they are in this country. It's not a
Yes.
normal problem, right?
Oh yes, yes, yes. And immigrants have known that. They
Yes.
have called the police when they see a crime. They have collaborated with police. They have, and one of the things that is happening, I think, it's pe- police um, um, around the country are concerned that they're going to lose that connection with communities when they see what's happening now.
Right. And I often point out I know many people who work with border enforcement agencies. I
Hmm.
have for years. I meet with the ICE director, the Border Patrol director regularly, and I've met wonderful people. And of course, in my parishes, in our
Oh yeah.
churches around El Paso, they're members. I know they're wonderful, dedicated public servants.
Hmm.
So I hope that people who listen to us recognize
Yes.
that we're not um, condemning a whole organization,
Mm.
but we're very concerned. If I may speak for you, Cecilia, as well, concerned about policies that are being enacted right now, and putting those good people in very uh, difficult moral situations.
Absolutely. The policies mm, put law enforcement agents, put agents who have to implement policy in very difficult moral um tensions,
Yes.
and especially I think when the um the enforcement happens in the same co-ethnic group
Yes.
as the agents. And I think that is extremely tough for the people who have to do the job of implementing laws and policies,
Yes.
but they're doing this with people they know or people they have lived with. It's very, very tough for them.
Yes. Here in El Paso, we're of course right on the border,
Right. I
and
can imagine.
the border is part of our reality, and we've formed our identity in a certain way as a place where people pass back and forth. Thousands pass back and forth every day here to work, to school, to whatever, if because they have family on both sides. Um,
Right. Right,
a-
right, right.
and it's not really anything like most people imagine based upon, as you say, those little snippets that are repeated over and over again on the news. People sometimes expect to find it chaotic here. It's not. As a matter of fact, we are one of the safest cities of its size in the country. And even Ciudad Juarez, which certainly has a reputation it earned because of organized crime there, uh, you know, uh, most of the uh, violence happens between crime groups, actually. Uh, but certainly they have problems to deal with. But um, you know, it's created this level of fear that isn't proportional uh, to the
Right. And
issue.
most people don't know, for instance, that El Paso is one of the safest places. Most people don't know that. They think the border is just out of control and chaotic
Yeah.
and dangerous.
Hmm. Yes, we
But
invite people to come to El Paso, to come to
mhm,
experience. We love it when people come, and we 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 love to see them as they try to process the difference between what they think they know about our area and the reality. Um,
right.
so I
Well,
and I suppose maybe one thing a conclusion we can draw from our discussion, from our own particular perspectives, is uh, just how important it is for our listeners. Just we're not trying to tell you what you have to believe. We're just trying to tell you what we've experienced and what we know. But look into it yourself, and
right,
it's not hard. You don't have to come to the border necessarily, but you don't have to go to Latin America. Although
right.
both of those would be very instructive, uh, but
Yes,
but meet an immigrant, talk to them, ask them why they came and how they are and what they're experiencing right now. Just just please, with an open mind, just talk to them, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
and see if
Yeah.
you don't have an experience like I've had. Uh,
Yeah. Yes. And that is easy to do because immigrants are everywhere,
yes.
are absolutely everywhere in
Mhm.
every sector of the economy, in every job, everywhere.
They
So
tend to
that
be
is
very
easy.
quiet because obviously, they're especially now, there's so much fear.
Right.
And
Yes.
they'll have to trust you before they'll really share their story. But,
Right, 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 right.
if you take the time to
Yeah.
to talk, um,
Yes.
uh, you'll hear their story.
Yes. Yes. The humanity of people. And from my side, yes, I fully agree to try to see the humanity in others and also to know that there are other sources of information. There are other sources of that people can go to learn about the system of immigration. It's very complex, but there are many ways to read and understand why we are in this situation. So on the one hand, absolutely contact with directly with immigrants to understand and see their humanities, but also to approach organizations or any other sources of information that can clear the confusion that we see today. I think that that would be very helpful for everybody, for the immigrants, but also for people,
For all of us, for
so
all of
that they
us.
cannot be, so they will not be so fearful.
Yes. And I think it's so important that we in our country recognize what a treasure our immigrant brothers and sisters are.
Yeah.
That our country, you've heard it before, and it's true, was built on immigrants and a coming together that has been unique in the history of the world.
Yeah.
Uh, and not a and there's been a misunderstanding or many misunderstandings along the way. It's not the kind
Yes.
that says you have to throw aside everything that you brought. No, our benefit has come because they've brought the values from their own culture, their own faith, their own way of living, and that has made
Right.
all of us better by
I
the
think so.
relationship.
The country. Yes. Yes.
And they often become professors in universities too.
Yes, and they also become clergy and very high ranking, and so it's also they are as I said, they are everywhere.
Yeah.
So it's easy to meet and to talk with immigrants.
Amen. So I think we're
Yes.
about at the conclusion of
Yes.
our hour
I
together.
think that's it.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's sure been a pleasure talking to you, and
Yes, it's been really a pleasure. Very much so. Thank you.
I
Yes, very,
uh,
very. I've enjoyed it a lot.
so may I just conclude by saying God bless you all. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you.